This is a story of personal growth. The core story of Pride and Prejudice is not love, but the growth of a woman. Secondly, many people see Pride and Prejudice as a typical Cinderella story. But her story is very different from Cinderella's. Why? Because Cinderella attracted the prince with her beauty, purity, and innocence. But Elizabeth, in addition to her appearance, has a very independent personality and spiritual dignity. She has her own clear and firm understanding of love and marriage. So when she met Prince Darcy, they first disliked each other and quarreled with each other. Then they loved and hated each other, and finally they were able to treat each other equally. What happened to the two of them? At the same time, they overcame some defects in their own personalities, crossed classes, and reaped perfect love. It sounds sweet, right? So let's put the third point today. Who should read Pride and Prejudice today? First, the love and mate selection stories of the five Bennet sisters are completely different choices. Whether in England over 200 years ago or in our current lives, the charm of a classic lies in the timeless values it conveys. Even after more than 200 years, will women living in the 21st century still experience unspeakable struggles under the pressure of their elders to marry? Will they still find various issues in mutual love and getting along with their partners? How do we find equality and mutual respect in love? When choosing marriage, do we follow the call of our hearts or succumb to reality? These issues Elizabeth faces are timeless, regardless of the era or place, always making us feel a sense of awe. So, as long as a woman wants to take control of her life, she can find inspiration in this book. There's a quote from Pride and Prejudice: "People change so much that you can always find something new in them." That's the main reason for rereading this book. Now, Jane Austen, the author of Pride and Prejudice, was a legendary female writer. There's a movie called Becoming Jane, which tells her life story, and it's very moving. I'm also a novelist, so I know that every writer puts a bit of themselves into their work. The heroine of this book is Elizabeth, the second daughter of Mr. Bennet. Compared to her sisters, she isn't the prettiest, she definitely doesn't have the best personality, and she can be a bit irritable and sharp-tongued. But this girl ends up winning the love of Mr. Darcy, the most perfect gentleman in all of England. Why? Because Elizabeth has something special. This special something in Elizabeth is also a projection of Jane Austen herself. To understand this legendary author and why she's on par with Shakespeare, let's start from the beginning. In 1775, Austen was born into a clergyman's family in England. Since the 15th century, there was a rapidly developing industry in England: wool spinning. The price of wool was rising fast. Austen's family got rich from the wool business, becoming part of the gentry, which means they were middle-class landowners. By Austen's father's generation, the family's fortune had declined, and they weren't wealthy anymore. However, Austen still received a good education and was very talented. From a young age, Austen showed an exceptional talent for writing. She published 6 novels in her lifetime, and Pride and Prejudice was the first one she finished, but it wasn't the first to be published. In 1797, when Austen was in her 20s, she finished Pride and Prejudice, but it was rejected by publishers, who told her she wasn't suited for novel writing. But Austen didn't give up on writing. She kept at it quietly. And in 1811, she finally published her first novel, Sense and Sensibility, which was later made into a movie by the famous director Li Lei. Did you notice the gap? It was almost 15 years. This shows Austen had a certain quality. She was very optimistic. Even when her work was rejected, she persisted because of her passion, which is truly admirable. In 2007, a movie called Becoming Jane, starring Anne Hathaway, was released. Have you seen it before? It's very charming. Hathaway perfectly portrayed the elegant, intellectual, and slightly shy Jane Austen. So, how did she complete her writing? You have to know that in those days, women writing wasn't encouraged. In the biography Jane Austen, there's a detail about how she was very careful not to let anyone outside her family, servants or visitors, notice she was writing. She wrote on small slips of paper because they were easy to hide quickly. For instance, if the door creaked, she could instantly cover her work to keep it a secret. Jane Austen didn't actually enjoy the huge fame from her published works during her lifetime. She led a rather quiet, home life. She liked music, but wasn't very skilled at it. She spoke French and a little Italian, and was very good at needlework. Notice how needlework was a must-learn skill for women at that time, much like Yun in 6 Records of a Floating Life. Other talents weren't as important, so women's status at that time was quite low, and Austen was no exception. She spent her entire life in a very small space, with only a few familiar people around her. She never traveled far, but she had a keen sense of observation. Just listening to the gossip around her provided rich material for her novels. Jane Austen never married. She had one unsuccessful romance, no children, and lived on her brother's support. She died at the age of 42, and only her family attended her funeral. So, you see, she was hardly a well-known figure. So, in Pride and Prejudice, we can see glimpses of Austen herself. To sum up, during Austen's lifetime, she didn't achieve fame or wealth through her works, much like the painter Van Gogh. But after her death, her 6 novels have ensured that we remember her even today. In Pride and Prejudice, we can actually see Austen's perspectives and experiences. For instance, Elizabeth, the heroine, has a close friend named Charlotte. Charlotte is originally a smart and sensible girl, but she isn't very attractive, and her family isn't wealthy. So, she uses some cunning and marries the disagreeable Mr. Collins. This was her choice after careful consideration. Charlotte tells Elizabeth, "I am 27 years old, I have no money and no prospects, I am already a burden to my parents." How realistic and helpless is this? Even today, we see such women around us, who, feeling they are getting older and lacking good conditions, get pressured into marriage. Even if there is no love, they see it as a choice for stability.